The first speaker is Tiffani Bova, and I got to know Tiffani at our event in London. Amazing speaker. She currently works at Salesforce as really a customer advocate and success and innovation evangelist. So essentially, she is the person who Salesforce sends out to really communicate all of the great things Salesforce and their ecosystem are doing around driving customer success. So she's got a great set of context about really what's going on there. So we're very excited to have Tiffani. And we also have a guy that many of you might know as well. And I got to meet him backstage. Just a phenomenal guy, Geoffrey Moore. Anybody heard of Geoffrey? Many of us absolutely read the Bible of Crossing the Chasm. And I recently read The Zone to Win. Now, I wasn't in the zone to win when I woke up this morning, but guess where I am right now? I'm in the zone to win. So please join me in welcoming Tiffani Bova and Geoffrey Moore up to the stage. Geoffrey. Geoffrey, how many times have you come out to that song?
Oh, never mind.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it happens a lot, I'm sure. So I noticed, Tiffani, you sat as far away from me as you could. I'm sorry.
I heard it was a hard night.
It was a little rough. So Tiffani, why don't we start with you? And I was talking with Geoffrey earlier. You know, this notion of disruption gets tossed around. In fact, I was making an analogy with Geoffrey about how last night in the pool, disruption was in the form of a beach ball. And it hit me in the face. And I didn't really know it was disruption until it fell at my feet. But I think it's getting tossed around a little bit too much, and I don't think I think it's been used a little bit in different contexts. So I thought maybe we'd start with you and kind of hear your thoughts on what the heck is disruption, and what do you think about when we talk about it?
Yeah, for me, I'd say that disruption is anything that makes us feel uncomfortable.
Like this?
You know, right? You can think about in our personal lives, we have a lot of things that have been going on in the technology space for a long time, sort of behind the scenes. But we now have this opportunity to really bring it into our day-to-day life. We used to do things one way before, and now we do them a different way now. But I'd say that while at its fundamentals that makes sense, I think the things we're now able to completely reimagine because of technology and just the way in which the world is moving, it completely allows us to rethink almost everything we do. The way we drive to work, get to work, communicate, collaborate, keep in touch with people, you know, in this case, you know, how we run our businesses and run our financial systems, et cetera. I mean, it's just, for those of us that have been doing it for a while, you just kind of go, wow. I mean, imagine if this was 15 years ago when I was at the earlier part of my career, I would have done things very differently.
Yeah, before even autonomous vehicles. So now we have a choice of not even driving ourselves to work, but really driving ourselves to work.
Yes,
it's kind of crazy. Geoffrey was talking about, you know, a kind of a little bit more abstracted view of it.
Well, I was thinking about the kind of the disruption we're all going through. At least for most of my career in the tech sector, we spent our disruptive innovations re-engineering the supply chain, largely in the 90s and moving into past the Y2K, because the world basically had a lot more demand than it had supply. And somewhere in the beginning of this century to the first, or at least the beginning of this decade, that's flipped. And now in more and more sectors of the economy, it's demand that's the scarce ingredient, not supply. And so we organized all our IT systems around the supply chain and around product. Product was king. And now we're in this flipped age of the customer, where all of a sudden it's like we have to reorganize all our protocols and all our processes around the customer. And our systems aren't designed to do that. And so it puts enormous pressure. I think about the folks in this room right now. When you try to find a new normal by re-engineering the customer delivery chain, the revenue supply chain, if you will, the first thing that happens is there aren't norms built into the software yet. So the professional services organizations in your companies have to absorb that shock first. They have to build that connection to the customer. They have to help design the new normal. And that's not what they were originally staffed to do. In the product model, a professional service organization was just supposed to implement the product. That's not what's going on. We're kind of inventing the new normal. And then when you're inventing the new normal in the age of the customer, because the customer has so much more negotiating power, because they're the scarce ingredient, that's putting huge pressure on the back office. Whereas before you could say, look, this is our pricing policy, this is our credit policy, you know, these are our escalation regimes. It's like, good luck with that. Because, you know, it's not 3 prices, it's 300 prices. And so all this, I think this whole business about disruption has to do with catching up to these forces that are pretty mega forces changing our world.
They are, and it actually hits a lot of what Todd and Joe and I talked about yesterday, which is if you aren't ready to adapt your business model from both new revenue streams, actual pricing models, and be able to capture that, even putting aside the notion of revenue recognition for a second, the technologies that are required to enable you to adapt to this disruption is critical. So maybe, Geoffrey, we start with you. What types of technologies? It's kind of flowing through front and back office. So what are those disruptive technologies?
For me, a technology becomes material when it makes something that used to be really expensive and hard to get virtually free. And I can remember at the beginning of my career, it was like memory was the thing that you couldn't. You had to design everything for 64 KB, and then it was the microprocessor wasn't powerful enough, and then it was the network wasn't broad enough. Well, now if you look at the last 5 years and say, what are the virtually free things that have come? Cloud computing has made deploying software anywhere in the world virtually free. Aaron Levy starts Box with a credit card as a sophomore in his dorm at USC. And mobile computing and smartphones have made connecting with 1.5 billion people bidirectionally, virtually free. Now, none of us designed our companies that way. None of us designed our processes that way. So it's not virtually free for anybody with legacy, right, but for all the startups it is. And I think those to me, you know, and just anything that, like the last one I'll just mention is sort of social networking. So social networking has made rooms and cars free. Right? I mean, the hotel industry and the taxi industry were based on the fact that they were scarce ingredients, and now they're free ingredients. So those are the kind of things I look for.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffani?
Yeah, I'd flip this a little bit on its head. I'd say that I actually think that the most disruptive thing in the market today is not the technology, it's actually the customer. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I say that is we, in our consumer lives, have certain expectations around technology, and then we bring them into our work life. The way we want to consume things, very frictionless, easy, you buy this, you buy that. That's very different than a sales rep taking them through what the options are from a product perspective and sitting across the table and saying, I know more about this product than you do. The power has shifted to the customer, which means that the sellers or the owners of the business that are out selling whatever it is that they're doing has to come with some value that is much more business oriented than just the product, the widget that's getting sold. So the moment that power shifts to the customer, the technology that's making that happen is almost like it doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all in the business to sell something. And the point being that if they now have shifted this conversation in a way that companies have to rethink the way they attract, retain, engage, socialize their customer. And the customer, by the way, is also significantly changing because the customer today could be a thing that's ordering something from another thing or a bot. I mean, a customer does not necessarily have to be a human being. So the customer shifting and that power is not just on the human side, it's on the technology side as well.
I agree. You hit something really key, which is, it's no longer a sales cycle, it's really a buyer's journey. And the software that you have should really provide you with insights on best how to engage with those potential customers. And the notion of renewal really never really existed until we had this new engagement philosophy. Maybe we switch to this notion, Todd, and I know you guys have both talked to him, he is talking to Joe and I every day. Speed is the new currency. And it really is. So not only, I think, Tiffani, to your point, you have to start to rapidly adapt to what your customer needs, but your software, your processes, and your people also have to move at that same speed. So maybe we start with you, Geoffrey, on this. How have you seen speed become the new currency?
Well, in the old systems world, we had vertically integrated, suite-oriented applications, whether they were from Oracle or SAP or PeopleSoft or Siebel or whomever. And they were very hard to change because if you change one thing any place, you have to change it everywhere. So what's happened in this century is when we went to that API-oriented architecture, all of a sudden we decoupled everything. When you decouple things, that means things can change at their own natural rate. We saw this with the open system stack in the 90s when we went from vertically integrated companies to open systems. But now we're in really open systems. You guys, for example, announced yesterday that you're going to take your HCM system and have ADP work with that. You couldn't do that 15 years ago, but because of the API structure, now you can do that. You're running on Salesforce. You're running on a different software company's platform. You couldn't do that 15 years ago because of this. So all of a sudden now, this where we get stuck, and many of us in this room are stuck, is because we are stuck with legacy encumbrance that we can't we can't break free from, and we're competing against next generation startups who frankly get to start with this as their design thing. So I think the speed thing is tied to decoupling, and I think we have to think about where can we strategically decouple ourselves so we can move faster.
Very interesting. Tiffany, what do you
Yeah, so I'd say completely agree. And you have to also think about speed, not just at the infrastructure layer, right, and the flexibility that that gives you, but speed also in making sure that you are where your customers are going to be and welcome them when they get there. Now, you don't have to be sort of Steve Jobs and be way out and be like, I'm going to anticipate or say, if I listened to my customers, I would have made faster horses and not a car. Right? I don't mean that far out, right? I just mean you have to start thinking about if my customers are going to want this tight integration between ADP and FinancialForce, right? Because they're looking for something. You're trying to get there before they may even know that they need it, so that you can anticipate the fact that this is a challenge that they're facing and you've already figured out how best to solve it for them and welcome when they get there. So I'd say speed for me is making sure that you're always keeping the customer at the center of the decisions you make, and not speed for just speed's sake, but speed for making sure that you're servicing them and adding value all the time.
Yeah, go at the right speed. Yeah.
But that's a tough one. The
Yeah,
balance
it's a
of
balance.
too fast, the Steve Jobs or the horses, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, that Zone to Win book, which is the latest one.
Yep.
It's actually about speed zones. So in your performance zone, which is your established lines of business, you have to work within speed limits that, frankly, are the constraints that you've built over the last 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. If you try to take that thing into some warp factor 2, you're just going to break it. An incubation zone, on the other hand, is designed to run at a very, very different clock rate. And so I think knowing which zone you're in, like failing fast, really good idea in an incubation zone, really bad idea in a performance zone, right? And so getting a sense of what's the right speed for the given zones is part of the art of the new management.
That's great. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and in fact, we had a great conversation with a lot of our analysts, guys that you guys and gals that you guys would integrate with a lot. And it's not just, what they were pointing out, it's not just important about the speed, and the zone is critical, but how to adapt to these changes much more quickly. And to your point, Tiffany, and maybe we start with you, it's all about customer. What does the customer need? So when you start talking to people and you think about this notion of speed, how should people think about adapting to all of these different changes?
Yeah, so I'd say that, after the last year, I've had the opportunity, now that I'm at Salesforce, to sort of go meet with a lot of customers and sort of hear how they're dealing with this sort of pace of change as it relates to their business and the business models, et cetera. And I'd say this, I'd say that companies don't get out and meet their customers enough. And so the challenge I see is they go, oh my goodness, all this has happened, but it started happening 4 or 6 quarters ago. Sure. But they weren't aware it was happening because they weren't connected enough to the customer. As you get higher in the organization, the gap between sort of strategy and execution gets bigger for the people in the field. So I'd say, get out of the 4 walls, go meet with your customers, have some kind of collaboration, communication loop back from your frontline people, back to the senior team, so that that pace of change isn't catching you off guard. You're much more aware of little pivots over time than this massive disruption, right? If you get too far away, then it's this, oh my gosh, we have to completely rip everything apart and start all over again, versus over time, you're doing a little pivot, a little pivot, a little pivot. And your customers are not always right. So I'm not saying, or sitting here and saying, like, everything they say you need to go do, the sort of faster horses analogy, balance. Right? You have to make sure you're tempering it against what you're able to do as a company, your culture, the capabilities of your products, the services, your people, all of those things. But ultimately, I think that is one area I think companies need to do a better job is getting out every day or every quarter, or listening into customer service calls, or going on sales calls, or meeting with the product guys and really sort of getting out of the comfort zone and understanding what's happening in the business.
Yeah. I just want to reinforce that, because in this demand economy where customer is the scarce ingredient, we used to, remember, in a supply chain economy, when you had extra cycles, you should have spent it with your suppliers. You should have spent it with your designers, your engineers. You would take Six Sigma and apply it to your internal processes, because that was the gating item to serving the market better. As Tiffany's pointing out, it's flipped. The gating item now is you're not connecting effectively enough with your customers, which means you need to apply Six Sigma to your customer interactions, not to your supply chain interactions. So the adaptability here, the good thing to remember here, though, is your customers do not want to leave you. Customers do not like to switch vendors. They don't need you to be Steve Jobs. They don't need you to be brilliant. They don't need you to be fantastic. They just need you to keep up. Right? Just please keep up. And if you're out there and having the conversations that Tiffany's talking about, you're going to find out where you need to keep up first and most, and you can make those changes as you go along, because you're not trying to be the disruptor. You're just trying not to be the disruptee. That's a different problem to solve, and if it can be solved through diligence and through just regular interaction, you don't have to be Picasso. Here, you just have to do your job. But the job has moved from coming to work, going inside your company, to coming to work and going to the customer interface.
And that's why that iteration, right? Fail fast in an iterative world is very different than fail fast when I'm completely deconstructing my business and then trying to rebuild it, because I've missed a couple of the shifts in the marketplace. And that's why if you go out and try something and it doesn't work and you recalibrate, it's not something you've put too much risk into, because you're just pivoting ever so slightly over time as you start to listen to what's happening at the customer's organization. And so, I would just say that, especially around in this particular arena, fintech, finserv, there's lots of disruption happening. As you get into other parts of the world, you've got, in Asia Pacific, where you've got people under the age of 27 have never stepped foot in a bank branch before, ever. They don't carry cash. They don't even know what it is like to carry cash. They, exchange money with each other across the dining room table via an app, and they do everything, via the smartphone. And then we walk in and say, no, it's this big process, and they go, no, it isn't. It's this process, right? And so, you just have to find a way to bridge the things we do today with what the next customer segment is going to look like, this next wave of customer.
So on that point, you guys have both made amazing, kind of a list of things that people should think about. This turns out that it's a lot to do with leadership as well. So as you guys think about it, and we'll start with you, Tiffani, how critical are all of these steps from a leadership and tone setting perspective? Like when you think about people really doing this right, you kind of have to have the right philosophical approach from a leadership point of view to really get these things done.
Yeah, so this is a tricky one for me to answer because of now where I work. So I would say this. I would say, over this past year, once again, I used to hear all the time it was a technology problem.
Right.
Right. And now I work for a technology vendor, so of course it's not a technology.
It's not, right.
Not a technology problem. But I will say that more often than not, it's a people process problem. Mm-hmm. And not a technology problem. Now, I'm not saying the technology is perfect and it does everything exactly the way that you want to have it done. But more often than not, it has to do, we've always done it this way, so we're going to keep doing it this way, and we're going to design the software to just replicate the process we've always had, and we're just doing it faster, cheaper, better. But that doesn't give us any competitive advantage. And so that's why going back and saying, our CEO, Mark Benioff, likes to say, having this beginner's mind, and Jeff Bezos says it as well, many sort of in that very disruptive mindset will say you have to sort of step back and say, I'm going to do a clean slate. I almost want to forget all of my muscle memory and the DNA that got me here, and how can I look at this with a fresh eye and actually change the people process side, which is so much about leadership and not about that technology and everything else we just talked about. Because all that's possible, but if you don't change the people process side of it, you're never going to be able to take advantage of all the things technology can actually bring you today.
I agree. What do you think, Geoffrey?
Well, I'm a big fan of Tiffany's new boss, Mark Benioff. He has a leadership thing that they call V2 Mom, and it kind of scales for the whole company. But vision and values are the V2, and that helps you reframe when there's a disrupting world. So the vision is like, well, what is the new future state? And
Super clear.
Yeah, just where are we going? And then the values are the one or two or three things that we think will get us there, but also we would never violate in order to get there. So,
right.
So it kind of sets the guardrails. And then methods is kind of where all the action is. That's what are we going to do this year to make progress against our vision. And what Benioff does is so interesting, is he forces rank order prioritization of everybody's lists of methods, starting with his own. So you always know in the management chain, what is the number one priority of your boss, what's number two, what's number three. You usually get assigned one of those priorities if you're reporting into that person, and then that becomes your thing, and then you separate that into your set of methods, and your people know which is your number one priority, number two, number three. So I think that combination of the reorienting vision, and then this highly prioritized set of methods to act against that vision helps overcome some of the muscle memory and some of the organizations. If they don't get really clear about what they're doing, they will revert to prior state. Everybody does. It's inertial momentum. So it really takes both vision and discipline to make it work.
Well, and it's a huge level of transparency. I mean, there's no question. And if you go and meet with any executive or anybody at the company, you just go look at their V2 mom before you go sit down and meet with them. You know exactly what they're focused on.
And they're all published.
And everything's published. So there's no sort of hidden agenda happening. But that's unique. I mean, I think that the trick with companies that have been in business a while is we started that way. But not being that way and then becoming that way is tough.
Bigger challenge.
Right? So culturally shifting the company to be much more innovative and disruptive and failing fast and culturally ready and listening to customers and going out on sales calls, or that's a cultural shift. And I always joke that we as human beings don't change very quickly as people. Forget our work life. Right? I mean, going to the gym, stop eating this, whatever it might be. We're sort of like, by January 8th, I've already given up my
Do you
New Year's
have to actually
resolutions.
get on the step matter?
You do, I think.
Oh.
I put that on my V2
I
mom.
bought one. I joined it.
It's sort of January 8th, you're sort of like, what were my New Year's resolutions? It's those things, right? And so really committing to what those are is, I wouldn't overcommit to a lot of change at the same time. I would slowly lean into what that looks like.
It's great advice, great advice. So clearly there's a lot of disruption. Obviously, I think this is really good around how leadership can actually get a little bit of rigor behind the people in the process with V2 Mom. And in fact, we're doing that because of Todd and Joe. And so we've put that through. It's very good. Maybe the audience would be interested in hearing kind of some of the next changes. Like what are you guys seeing in all of the meetings and all of the market awareness that you have? What should they be thinking about now?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, chasm guy.
Okay, whatever. So I made a couple of notes, but so first of all, I think the big thing is still AI and machine learning, and will be for the foreseeable future. But I was trying to apply this notion of when things become virtually free, and I was trying to think, well, what technologies coming down the pike have the opportunity to make things virtually free? And interestingly, in my view, which ones don't? So I wrote down 3 of each. So I think 3 that could, in the next 5x years, make something virtually free. It's very expensive today. I think blockchain can make the whole interconnection of secured contracts in any field virtually free. I think that autonomous transport, probably not consumer cars, but I talked to a guy yesterday who runs the Port of Oakland, and just getting the right containers on the right ships, they don't want any drivers anywhere in there anymore. So I think autonomous transport is going to do that, at least in niche industries. And I think maybe 3D printing could have an impact on a bunch of this stuff. GE did an incredible study where some of their GE engine parts did that. And the 3 that I don't think are going to do it, I don't see how cognitive becomes free anytime soon. So although I'm fascinated by cognitive, I don't see that it's going to be that one. VR and AR, again, I think really, I don't see how they make things free, but maybe that's because I'm just too old and my sensory systems don't work. And then quantum computing, I think is like way out there. So those are my 3 that I think I would not pay as much attention.
Those are good. Where did Alexa fit in there?
So Alexa, I'm going to talk about that. I'll wait for the next one.
We'll pause. Sorry, I just thought.
You're excited about
Have any of
Alexa?
you bought any? Alexa, I want
So-
something from Whole Foods.
Yes, so I have a funny sort of sidebar on that is, my mom thinks I still fix printers.
Your tech support, yes.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if she really right. So when you just want to be really humble, I go to Alexa, hey Alexa, who's Jeff Bezos, right? And it answers me, who's Jeff Bezos, gives me his whole, thing. Hey Alexa, who's Mark Benioff? And it gives me his whole thing. And I go, hey Alexa, who's Tiffani Bova? Sorry, can't answer that.
Yeah.
I'm like, clearly, I'm nobody, right? Although I pay all the bills, so I'm a little concerned that she doesn't know who I am. But
Come on.
anyway, I sidebar.
Your mom.
So I'd say the things that I sort of alluded to this a little bit ago is that the customer changing to things and this relationship between the human and the digital experience when it comes to customer service, marketing, and sales, I think is really fascinating for me, just because it's sort of what I do.
Sure.
And you can say, there's stats out of the analyst community, Gartner specifically, that said, it's going to be like 6 billion service calls from things by 2021 or something like that, which means who's going to answer those customer service calls? Other bots, other things? Who negotiates, who argues about what's what? Like,
shouldn't Alexa answer those for you?
Maybe, probably.
If she knew who you were.
Yeah, I say the day my Fitbit talks to my scale in my bathroom and locks my refrigerator, I'm out.
Terminator.
Yeah.
I'm officially
When your
out.
Fitbit gains consciousness,
Yeah,
yes,
when it goes, you know that New Year's
my
resolution,
gosh.
fail, you know.
Yes,
So,
boom.
yeah. So-
That's when you drop it in the
so
toilet.
I think there's a lot of interesting things around the sort of future disruption that are this combination of human and digital in the right ways. But there's also this sort of moral side of technology that we're having to face. Even with autonomous cars, you can say that a 30% actually of donors come from, unfortunately, car and motorcycle accidents.
Yeah. Yes.
And if we reduce those accidents by 50%,
Where are all the donors?
where are all the donors? And that's a horrible thing to say, but you have to think about the moral side and the moral implication of a lot of this sort of automation that we're doing. Like, what is that downstream effect to those things?
Unintended.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's unintended, super unintended, right? And the guy who runs the Port of Oakland didn't wake up one day and say, I don't want to have 1,000 people working on my docks. That's not his plan. It's the unintended consequence of how technology is moving. And so reskilling the workforce, a lot of the work we're doing around apprenticeships, and trying to get workers that may be displaced because of automation and AI and machine learning to figure out what is the next skill they would need to do. And so I'd always say whatever you think technology, robots, bots, AI can't do, that's sort of the place to go, or where you have this natural combination of the two.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy when you have to start thinking about like the rules in iRobot. Like, Alexa, if I'm really hungry and you've locked the fridge, if I have a safe word, please open it. But don't forget about rule number 1, when I'm not really hungry and I shouldn't open that fridge, unless I put the Fitbit in the toilet. Then all rules are gone. Anyway, we have a couple more minutes, guys, and I know that you've thought a lot about the companies that you think are doing this really well. So why don't we start with you, Geoffrey?
So I wrote down 3 companies that I just have a lot of admiration for right now for different reasons. Again, what I really admire about Salesforce is actually the CEO is a social leader. I think the way Mark's intervened in a series of social situations has been sort of a charismatic exemplar to many other CEOs, and I'm very excited about that. From a technical point of view, I think Google has reset the boundary for every other company on the planet in terms of the kind of technology things they're doing. I just think they're astounding and continue to be astounding, which is really surprising me. And then in terms of just reshaping the world that I live in, I think Amazon is going to have more impact on my life in the next 10 years than any other company.
Clearly. Great. Tiffani?
This is sort of, that's hard to answer. Of course, one would be where I work.
Yeah.
That would be one. But I would say I like companies today that are in industries where the market is saying it's failing. Like, I'm just going to pick retail as an example.
Right.
Where retail is losing and closing all these doors, yet you see other companies opening doors. So it's not retail is dead. It's that retail without the intelligence and data to understand what's actually happening is dead. The old way of doing it, the new way. So I like companies that are using data analytics and intelligence to be smarter about what customers are looking for,
right,
and ways to partner in competitive ways that they would not have maybe done in the past in order, once again, to serve the customer better. So companies that are doing that, Amazon buying Whole Foods, you sort of say, well, now will they, or opening bookstores, let me just pick that, right? I mean, opening bookstores, you could argue, well, why is that? Well, they know everybody that's buying books and they don't buy these certain books in that area, so we're going to open bookstores that cater to that particular demographic.
Highly probable books.
Highly probable, right? So I think that I'm really inspired by those companies that are using technology in innovative ways to grow the business and to buck the trend that the market seems to be saying is happening.
I agree. Great conversation, guys. I have a favor before you leave, thinking socially. Would you guys mind taking a selfie with me with the crowd in the background? I think we should. Tiffani, you should be in the middle.
Yeah,
I know you don't want to be near me, but.
That's right. This is
Okay. All right. All of you guys, you're in there?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, please join me in thanking these guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Good deal. Thanks.
Thank you.